Right, because these are women that want to invest, right? They're thinking about it in really smart, strategic ways. Like, what's the return on that investment? And when they understand how partnership works and how this model works, they're like, well, that's really obvious. There's only and ever a return on that investment, basically.
The messages we get about how we should scale a service business are pretty one note. Basically, we're told to do a bit of client work, spin that into a few digital courses or a membership group, and then sit back and let the money roll on in. But that's almost never how it works. That so-called passive income actually takes a ton of work. But this is the bill we all get sold, that there's no way to scale a service business profitably and sustainably while sticking to a one-to-one service delivery model. When someone is talking about scaling a service business, they're often talking about that one-to-many model, those courses or group programs. But that's not a great fit for everyone, and that's not how a lot of us want to run a business. So if we opt out of the one-to-many model, what else is out there? How can you scale a high-touch service business in a sustainable way without heading down that path? We're about to find out. I'm Susan Bowles, and you're listening to Break the Ceiling, the show where we talk unconventional strategies to increase your operational capacity. And my guest today is Lacey Seitz, and she's got a revenue-sharing pricing structure that allows her to scale her one-on-one coaching business to dramatically grow her profits without adding more clients. This unique model allows her to double down on her investment in each client, reap the rewards when their work with her pays off, but also creates a pricing structure that builds trust and represents the true long-term partnership she wants to build with each client. Let's dive in. All right. Hi, Lacey. Thanks so much for being here with me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
So give me like a quick one sentence, who you are, what you do, kind of to start the conversation off here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have my MBA and my master's in mental health counseling, and I basically put those two together to help high achieving women grow and scale their online business.
Awesome. And you have a very unique kind of pricing compensation structure in your business. Can you tell me a little bit more about that, how it works?
Absolutely. So when clients hire me, they pay me a base rate, but then on top of that, they pay me 10% of the new revenue generated through our work together. So if they come to me already having clients or whatever, obviously that doesand count. I'm not just coming and taking 10% of their business, but taking 10% of the new revenue we generate, because I want them to actually feel like we're partners. I think so often in the coaching space, it's kind of like you pay me and like hopefully it works out for you, right?
Right.
And I want it to feel like you pay me and I have a vested interest in your success. And like when I win, you win, and I call it partnership. And so basically they only pay me when they're having that win, when they're making that money, when their revenue is growing. And it has just been incredible.
So how do you track that? Is it, any revenue that comes in after you guys start working together, or are you tracking specific kinds of revenue?
So I would say mostly it's any revenue that comes in after we start working together, but certainly there are variances to that. Like if there was somebody you had been talking to well before we started working together, it's an old client that, you had a relationship with for a long time that you knew was going to resigns, like things like that. I'm like happy to like understand that I didn't play a role in that. But in general, it's usually like 10% since we began working together.
Okay. And did you always price your services that way, or was this something that you transitioned to at some point? Was there some kind of trigger that led you down this path?
For sure. I did not always price them this way. And there was definitely a trigger. I also tested it for a long time, so we can talk about that too. But initially, I just priced normally. Like, I just had a flat coaching rate. That's what you paid, that kind of thing. But something I was hearing from people over and over again that were coming to me to work with me is basically like, I've been burned before and I'm scared, right? Another thing that I was hearing is like, I really want to do this, but like, it just feels like such a big leap pricing wise, right? And my old background is that I was in the nonprofit world and I worked a lot on like re-engineering service delivery models. So I was like always asking the question of like, how can we do this better? How can we reach more people? How can this be more accessible? Things like that, right? And so that really was the question I started to apply here. Like, how can we create accessibility? How can this be done better? How can people stop being so scared? of getting, screwed again, basically, or whatever,
Yeah,
their thought process
absolutely.
was, right? And that's kind of where this came from. I had been pondering it for quite a long time. And then I like specifically remember one day I was like taking a bubble bath as it would be, not thinking about it at all. And it literally just hit me. Like I was like, oh my God, I'm just going to charge a revenue percentage. And I pretty much ran with it, starting right from that moment.
So did you transition existing clients, or you use the new model with new clients? How did you actually implement this?
Yeah, great question. So actually what I did at first was I'm like a big tester. Like I don't love to like dive into anything. Like I want to get data, I want to tweak it, like stuff like that. So what I did in the beginning was I basically ran what I called the partnership process, and I had people apply. And so I didn't even charge a base rate then. I was basically like, work with me for 10% of your revenue. And I had so many people apply. Like I think the first time we had maybe 100 to 200 applications. I don't quite remember.
Wow.
And I took people through a really long process because I was basically like, well, I want to vet you if and make sure you're.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of risk on your part.
Yeah, totally. So I did that. And the first time I think I took on 2 or 3 clients, and I think both of them ended up paying me more than my flat rate. And I was like, wow, there's something to this. And so I actually ran the partnership process, I think 3 more times before I took it full scale in my business. So I had a lot of data going in, which was really important. Like I already could see how this was working. And I think that's really important with innovative ideas. Sometimes is that, sometimes we're so quick to jump in, and it's like, okay, if you test it for a while. Like I basically tested it for a year before I brought it fully into my business.
I gotcha.
When I did, I only did it for new clients, and I grandfathered in old clients. So I still have clients to this day that have been with me that long. I mean, maybe like 1 or 2, right? But like that aren't paying a percentage, but basically everyone else is.
Interesting. So when you were vetting people to decide whether or not they'd be a good match for this revenue share model, what were you looking for? What characteristics were you kind of filtering for?
The most important to me was honestly commitment, because I think that something like a revenue share like that, where you don't have skin in the game up front, like if you're lacking in commitment, like that can be a really big deterrent, right? So
Yeah, especially when we're talking revenue and it's dependent on them actually going and selling
oh
things.
my God, 100%. So basically I took them, like they had to fill out an application, then they had to make a video, then they had to fill out an entire business plan.
Okay.
So that was like a 3-week process. And so by that point, like they had invested a lot in terms of like time, energy, their own like, digging and answering questions and everything like that. And so I was really more like, who is willing to go through this whole process, number one, and stay committed
Mm-hmm.
to it? And then how committed are they in those applications? Like, it's very obvious when someone wants to put like a 1-word answer for everything.
Right. Yes.
Right? Versus like someone that like really wants to tell you like how they're going to use this to make it work. And that's a constant question I'm always asking in that process is like, what are you bringing to the table? Like this is a partnership. So like, tell me why I should pick you. What are you going to do to make this work? And then I kind of just went off my gut, honestly.
Interesting. Yeah, I love the idea of using the process itself as a filter. I do something similar with one of my lead sort of products or services. Is I have a fairly extensive questionnaire that's there for the purpose of making sure that they're thinking about their answers, that they're
Yeah.
getting ready to have the conversation we're going to have, and kind of that using that commitment as part of the process. So I love that concept.
Absolutely. I think that like, it's surprising how many people aren't committed to things like that. And so it is a really, really helpful filter.
Yeah, and absolutely, particularly in something where there's so much risk on your end in terms of you can coach them, but you can't do the work for them
Mm-hmm.
ultimately. They have to be able to do the work to generate that revenue that's ultimately the result of your work together. And it's a little bit, you're taking on the risk of them not doing the work that they're supposed to do.
Totally. I think like one way that I've reframed that is that I feel like I want to stand behind my own work and I want to put my money where my mouth is, kind of thing. I think that is vastly missing in our space in so many ways. Like, I think we've gotten to this point where we're asking people to pay very, 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 very high rates without really wanting to have any stake in that game or put our money where our mouth is. And like, as a coach, you can't do the work, but like, we also can't take no responsibility. And so I think it's just this thing I like to play with of like, what is my level of responsibility in this, right? And I guess you could say I valued it at 10%. but but I think that's an important question, right?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting perspective because I agree, and this I can see where the revenue share model sort of functions as a little bit of a guarantee for them from the client's perspective. It's an easy sales tool of, you don't this doesn't happen unless you actually see results. So I love that as a both as a sales tool and as your own personal kind of check to make sure that you are still really invested in your work with your clients.
Absolutely. I think that's a beautiful way to say it. Like, it is like a check on both sides almost. It's like a check and balance kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And something that I have found to be really interesting in doing it is I feel like I've almost attract, and obviously I'm like a super biased because they're my clients, right? But I feel like I attract such smart business women because of that. Like, I feel like they're really thinking about it in a different way. Like, so many of my clients are making over the 250, 500K mark and hiring me because they want that, because to hire someone that's further along, so to speak, in that realm, you're talking $5,000 a month for a base rate for a coach kind of thing. And they're like, I could do that. I can afford that at this revenue, but I want somebody who's like literally invested in my growth and who I pay if I grow, who I'm not just paying a really high rate because they've maybe gotten a result before. I want someone who I'm paying a really high rate because they can get me a result, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I could see where that, that kind of model would inherently attract people that are more invested and are thinking more critically about how their business operates and how they are valuing basically every dollar that goes out
Mm-hmm.
and making sure that that dollar is working for them.
Right, because these are women that want to invest, right? Like, they're not like wanting to get out of investing in their business or investing in their growth, but like, yeah, they're thinking about it in really smart strategic ways. Like, what's the return on that investment? And when they understand how partnership works and how this model works, they're like, well, that's really obvious. There's only and ever a return on that investment, basically.
So, going back a little bit to the pricing model. So, when you started this off, you were doing just revenue share only. What prompted you to add back in a base rate?
Yeah, great question. So initially when I did the revenue share only, it was like with two clients, basically. I would do like two at a time. And then I would have still all my regular clients, like just on a base rate or just on a regular payment structure. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So I kept feeling a pull to be like, this is something, like this means something. I really want to turn my business in this direction. But fundamentally, at the end of the day, like, I have operating expenses as a business, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I felt like I needed some level of certainty and I needed to take some level of responsibility there too, because of course I have a team to pay and all of that. And so I was trying to find that balance of like, how can I basically make this my business model, but without taking so much risk that I'm like not putting myself in a good position to actually serve my clients? Because I think that's important too. Where like, I want to be
Mm-hmm.
invested in their success, but not so invested that I'm like, well, if you don't do good on this launch, I can't pay my team kind of thing, right?
Right.
Because then we're like over invested and it gets weird. So for me, that's where the base rate came in. Like, I was like, if I'm going to transition my whole business to this, that has to be a non-negotiable, because that keeps me the right amount of invested and detached with my clients. And it gives me the right amount of certainty and ability to function and operate as a business.
That totally makes sense. And balancing kind of where your level of risk and investment should ultimately be and making that reflect how you emotionally are also invested in their business.
Exactly. And I think another important piece of it is I really do think, oh my gosh, what's that quote? It's going to like totally leave me now, but it's basically something about like, the energy is in the transaction, or I forget. Do you know what quote I'm saying? But meaning like there's some level of energetic exchange that's really important in having to pay your coach something, right?
Yeah.
Like there's a belief that comes through that of like, I believe this much in my business that I am willing to put this money on the table first, kind of thing, right?
Yeah, there's definitely a psychological kind of investment that comes with putting your money where your mouth is.
Exactly. So I feel like I'm kind of doing that, right? By being like, I'm willing to like be your partner in this and let's go all in. And then I need them to be able to do it a little bit too. Like, and I'm willing to pay your base rate. Like, so it feels like there's this even exchange of us both being like, let's put some energy and some stake in the game.
That totally makes sense. So when you are kind of pitching this non-traditional model to new clients, do you get any kind of resistance because it's very atypical, or do you use it as a filter, or how does that kind of conversation end up working?
So I love that question because I have to tell you, when I first started doing this, I was like, I basically prepared myself. Like, I was like, I'm probably going to get a ton of pushback on calls. Like, this is probably going to be something like most people aren't going to be interested in adopting. I'm okay with that. Like, I like prepped hard. You know what I mean? I don't think I've really gotten one sincere objection around it. Because most people are like, I freaking love that you are invested in my success in that way.
So it's most people are viewing it more as a positive than a negative.
Exactly. Most people are viewing it as a positive. I think like the only time I've ever really gotten any level of pushback is sometimes like, so a lot of my clients work with me for a long time. Like I have a 6-month program, but most of my clients stay with me for a year or longer. And
Okay.
every now and then, like as a client has like really grown in our work together and they're about to re-sign, they're like, oh my gosh, I realize how much money I'm re-signing for at this point, basically, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like always happy to talk through that with them. But ultimately, like the conclusion most of them come to is like, but the reason I'm making this much money is because we've had this partnership. And so it makes sense versus like going to someone else and paying them this much money who hasn't been part of my success or hasn't built this with me, so to speak.
No, that totally makes sense. It's yeah, the concept is just really interesting.
It's a lot to take in when you're like at that point and you're like, oh, wait, I get how much I'm making and how much I'm re-signing for at this point, right?
Yeah, but it's not really any different than something like an affiliate program, or there's a lot of ways where we cut a percentage of our income out to other expenses. There's not intellectually necessarily anything different to
Yeah.
a revenue share to your coach versus a revenue share to a referral or an affiliate.
100%. It's basically like an operating expense at that point. And like what I always remind people too is that like the thing that's so safe about it is it's literally based on what you make, just like affiliate sales, right? Like I'm not paying out affiliates if they're not making sales. And like it's the same here. So I think that's super valuable.
Absolutely. So how do you actually execute this? So you are like from an actual physical exchange
Yeah.
of invoices
Yep.
and payments. How do you make that happen? How do you have access to see what they're making and you send them an invoice? You just trust them? How does that kind of exchange work?
Yeah, great question. So in our contract, we have the right to audit any and all of their books, basically. That is not a practice that feels necessary most of the time, right? Like, feel like it's really interesting to me, but I think like that partnership mentality, like that starts off the coaching relationship in such a different way. Like, I feel like I just know where my clients are at. Like, they're telling me about their sales. I know what they're making. Like, I have a guesstimate of like where we're ending up. So, like, I never really feel this like deep pull to be like, how can I like get exact specifics? Like we truly form a relationship where I just believe and totally trust in what they're saying. And we're talking enough and communicating enough. I'm like very hands-on with all my clients that like, I pretty much know. Right. So in terms of like the specifics, what happens is we have an automated reminder that goes out to all of our clients on the first Tuesday of every month. basically to say like, reconcile your numbers for last month, let us know what they are. They have a certain amount of days to get that back to us. Then we invoice them based on their percentage. And then they have like, 10 days to take care of it. So they're effectively getting 2 invoices from us each month, which is the base rate and then the percentage. And so instead of paying monthly sum, so to speak, like in most coaching situations, they're basically paying us twice a month.
Okay, that makes sense. So your clients are getting a good result from this. What kind of impact has this new approach had on you and how your business feels to operate? And how has it kind of impacted your operational capacity?
Oh my gosh. Like it's changed everything. So I'm someone that loves one-on-one. Like some of my clients don't. Like so I could be on 7 calls in a day and be like, that was the best day ever. And some of my clients are like, if I was on 7 calls in a day, I would like jump off a bridge. Like I cannot with that.
Yeah, that sounds exhausting.
Right. So it's like just a matter of personal preference. Like this is certainly not like a recommendation I have for everyone, but for me and my personality and like what I love, like it has been an incredible fit. And it's just changed the game because for so long, what I was basically told by like friends and mentors and whatever is that I was like limiting myself and playing small by not scaling, with like the one-to-many model and by not having like big group programs and whatever. And I'll tell you that I tried it. Like I remember like my last group program launch, like it went well. Like I think we had 43 people. It was good. I hated it. Like I loved the people. I just hated it. I hated launching. I hated running a group. I wanted to like literally be in all of their businesses. I would like stay up at night, like searching them on the internet to try to find out more about their business. Like it just was not a good situation, right?
Well, I think there's a lot of messages out there about that is the only choice in terms of scaling an online business is that you have to start doing group programs or you have to start doing courses. And there's no possible way to work one-on-one with clients without either growing an agency or figuring out an alternative. And I love that you kind of said screw it to all of that. Said I'll just find a way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I really did feel like that. Like I was basically just like, I'm so sick of hearing like one-on-one isn't scalable. Like I'll just figure that out because that's like, I mean, this sounds so cheesy, but I really feel like this measure of like, but this is what I'm meant to be doing in the world kind of thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so it's just changed everything in terms of like, I feel like we actually have what I can call scalable one-on-one. So we started at the beginning of last year. And you can imagine I had like a lot of clients that were grandfathered in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Last year, we did nothing different in our business besides changing to that new model. And again, a lot of people were grandfathered in, so it wasn't like a full scale thing. We added 100K in revenue to our business last year just with that.
Just from that. Wow, that's impressive.
Like didn't work more, didn't take on more clients, nothing. Like it was just like with the new clients and their growth, that's what we were able to add. And so for me, like, I might not have the business model that goes 0 to $1 million in a year, but just to be able to see like we can add 6 figures every year through this thing. And I think we'll have added 6 figures this year too. It just has changed my ability to be like, I can do it my way. I can make things work my way. And like, there's literally nothing in the world that makes me more proud than being able to be like, I made an extra 100K because I helped my clients make an extra $1 million. Like that is so satisfying to me.
Well, yeah. And it's great. It's a great sales tool. I love actual numbers and saying these are the actual results that I got. Like, here's the real numbers. Here's what happened. Here's the impact. And I think that's really powerful. But I also love the perspective that it was really about doubling down on your commitment to your clients and your commitment to run a business that was the right business for you and how you work and how you want to work. And I think that is underestimated as a determining factor of what kind of business you should run.
Yeah, I always say to my clients, like, making money isn't the most important thing. It's how you make the money.
Absolutely.
Right? Like I probably could be making a lot more to be perfectly honest if I had gone the, do a big group program thing, it just wouldn't matter because I wouldn't be happy. And like, why did all of us actually start our business? Because we actually want to feel like happy and lit up and make the money. And so the how is so freaking important in terms of it matching your personality. I think for some people, like the big scale launches, and so I have plenty of clients whose personality that epically matches. But like, I think that we just don't take into account enough, like, what is the thing that makes this not feel like a job? Because then the money is like an extra bonus, right?
Yep. So what are you planning to do in terms of scaling after this? How has this changed your approach to scaling? Are you at you're going to hit capacity and stick with your clients that you've got and continue to grow their revenue, or are there other ways that you're looking at approaching this?
Yeah, great question. So I feel like I'm now in the practice. This is like a little bit woo, but it's relevant. But like, I
I'm
just
down
like
with the woo.
always believe like a divine download is coming, because I had such an epic experience with being like, I will be a one-on-one person, and then being in the bathtub and just like finding the answer. So like, basically every year in my business, I always tell myself like, it's always this time of year. It's always around now. I'm always like, a divine download is coming. And so like, I think that I'm birthing one. I don't know what it is yet, but something else will come. Last year, it was that I decided to do my podcast. And basically what I do on my podcast is I just record 6 months of coaching someone. And that was like
cool.
Totally divine download idea, like, just one of those things. So anyway, like TBD. But in terms of the scalability plan, obviously, like I could just cap it in terms of like, we're growing because our clients' revenue is growing every year, right? And so I think that is a trajectory that like is really unlimited. But I'm also testing it and doing it in another model, which is a mastermind model with percentages. So I have 8 people right now in a mastermind where we do percentages from that too.
Ooh, interesting.
And that's been really, really amazing too. So like in some ways, it's like scalable on many levels, but the revenue percentage is going to continue to be something that's really present. And I think it will be the thing that continues to grow our revenue too.
No, I absolutely think that. And I think it does allow you to double down on the clients that you have, where so often when we're stuck with, fixed rate kind of engagements that aren't necessarily tied to the success or the results that we're seeing for clients, there's this kind of tapping out with a specific client where, if they came in 15 years ago when your rates were really, really low, you have to offload them or get them onto a new, more plan. If your rates change, you are then compelled to either find new clients or bump the clients that you have. And I love that this kind of model allows you to continue reinvesting in that partnership, continue reinvesting in the business and the results that you've already seen without feeling that pressure to constantly be renegotiating in order to in order to raise your rates or hit your revenue goals.
I really like how you said that. And I think that's a really great point, which is I feel like it actually lets you almost like put your attention on the skill instead of on the sale, so to speak, right? And so I feel like I get to invest a lot of my attention in the skill of coaching and growth and the things that I'm like most epically interested in, right? Because that other piece is taking care of itself in a new way. So I think that's a perfect way to say it.
I love that. So before we wrap up, is there anything that you think we should talk about that we haven't yet?
I think what I would just say is, well, actually I have 2 things. One is I think just like permission to do it your way. And I know you talk so much about opting out. And I think that is just so important. Like, I feel like if I could literally give everyone I talk to, all of my clients, everyone, that hears from me or whatever, one message, it would be like, you can do it your own way. And I just love how much you're sharing that point. And I just want to reinforce it one more time. Like, this is a cool business model. I'm like all for it, but like, it doesn't have to be this. Like, I just hope this is an example of like, if there's something that's on your heart and that you're meant to do, you can find a way to build and scale that, no matter what anyone else says, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And the second thing I would say is like one of my like best, like biggest wins in terms of thinking about things like that has been just using blue ocean strategy. Are you familiar with that?
Yep. Absolutely.
So like that's such a good tool to just start on for this. Like they have like 4 really key questions. And like I definitely asked myself those questions a lot when I was building out this model. And in many ways, those questions are what led to it. Like I had been thinking about blue ocean strategy a lot before that idea came to me. And so I think that that's just such a good place to start in terms of like, okay, cool. Like I hear this and I want to opt out of some things, but like, where do I even begin asking those questions? Like, I think that's a perfect place to start.
Awesome. I think that is a fabulous note to end on. So where can our listeners find you if they want to connect or learn more?
Yeah, beautiful. So my website is alituplife.com. And my podcast is called Literally. So either of those places you can find me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here and for sharing and being so open about your revenue model. I really appreciate it. And I think our listeners are getting a lot of value out of it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so grateful to have this conversation.
The revenue share model Lacey just shared with us is only one option for scaling a service business while opting out of the one-to-many model. Next week, I'm talking to Jake Jorgevin of Lead Cookie and Content Allies about an alternative option, scaling up your team. We'll talk about how he scaled a high-touch, high-volume LinkedIn sales agency by creating rock-solid processes and standardizing his service delivery. And if you're looking for some options to scale your service business while still working directly with clients, that's exactly what I help entrepreneurs like you do as their CFO and growth advisor. You're listening to Break the Ceiling because you know, or at least hope, that there's a way to break through that doesn't involve working more hours, sacrificing quality, or jeopardizing customer satisfaction. And there is. When you're maxed out, growing your business is as much about what you choose not to do and how you choose to do it, as it is about what you've packed into your to-do list. It all starts with getting clear on your money and your foundational systems. I'll help you identify your profit centers, define processes that drive revenue, and create automations that fuel your cash flow. I'd love to talk with you about how you can jumpstart your revenue growth by doing less. To get started, shoot me an email at susan@scalespark.co. And from there, we'll hop on the phone and see if you're a good fit for a custom growth blueprint. Again, reach out to susan@scalespark.co. I'd love to help you break through the ceiling. Break the Ceiling is produced by Yellow House Media. Production coordinator is Sean McMullen. And our theme music is Feel So Fly by the Unders.